Hi, I'm Melissa, and I became a Christian at Church of the City 3.5 years ago at the age of 30. I was raised in Manhattan by a Turkish Muslim mother and a Jewish American father, and all that diversity around me and in my home just led me to have very little guidance in my life. And so I spent my 20s just traveling a lot, really idolizing creativity and being zen. I was really into yoga, just the lust of my flesh, the lust of my eyes, the pride of life. I was just completely in popular culture. And why not? I had nothing else to follow. It was in my late 20s that an event took place, and it ultimately changed the course of my life. A compounding wave of my sin just hit me, and I suddenly felt very deserving of condemnation. I went through a period of time where I was just in despair. I felt guilty, and I couldn't relieve myself. I would have moments of relief, but ultimately I was just so unhappy, and I didn't know why. And so my first place that I went to was the world. I did the things the world said would make me feel better. I went to an art residency program just to be free and paint. I changed my job. I went to yoga school. I meditated every morning. I worked out. I ate perfectly. And nothing helped, absolutely nothing. In fact, my despair became worse, and I started having depression and anxiety. And so I spoke to a friend of mine, my best friend, and she was part of Church of the City. I just spoke to her and I said, I'm not doing well. It's been a couple years now and I can't shake this feeling. And she said, have you ever prayed to God? And I think my exact words to her were, if God doesn't hear me on the bathroom floor, he's never gonna hear me. And she said, have you ever surrendered? And we were at her event, all her family and friends were there. She asked that question and walked away to go host, and that question just lingered in my mind. And I ended up going home and just having a very sincere moment. I lifted up my hands and said, God, if you're real, please come into my life. And long story short, a few weeks later, I was in morning service at Church of the City, but it was not rational, it was not logical, but I was just so overwhelmed by the sermon, by the music, and after having so much hopelessness, that little tiny feeling of hope, I wanted it. I wanted it. And so I accepted Jesus, and it felt so refreshing. It was like I had never heard anything like this before in my life. It was like the world suddenly made sense in a way that I was seeking and wanting for so long. And so suddenly I accept Jesus, and Jesus is like, hey, I have a character. I have a character, and it's not changing. You can gauge the world against me. Like, you can gauge your thoughts, you can gauge your feelings, you can gauge the actions of others against my character. The burden is light. I just suddenly felt that relief of like, the world makes sense. And then on top of that, his mercy, his grace, and his forgiveness was overwhelming. And on my behalf, he silenced the voice of the condemner. Without me doing anything, he just fought on my behalf. So Jesus set me free. I was free. I was forgiven. The burdens of the world were off me. And that's changed my life.